What's up, everyone? If you've spent any amount of time shooting at night, chances are you've done it. You're standing there under a dark sky, trying to pull every bit of detail out of the scene, and before you know it, your ISO is sitting at 6400, 12,800, or even higher. We've all been there. And while modern cameras have gotten incredibly good at handling noise, there's still a point where pushing the ISO too far starts costing us image quality. What makes this interesting is that a lot of photographers immediately think they need a better camera when that happens, but sometimes the answer isn't a new camera at all. Sometimes it's a different lens. For years, ultra-wide lenses have dominated night photography, and honestly, there are good reasons for that. They capture huge portions of the sky, make it easier to photograph the Milky Way, and create those dramatic landscapes that many of us love. But today, we want to talk about a lens that often gets ignored once the sun goes down, the humble 50mm lens. A lot of us already own one. It might even be sitting in the camera bag right now collecting dust, while the wide-angle lens gets all the attention. But the truth is, a fast 50 can be one of the most useful tools for night photography. In some situations, it can actually help you create cleaner images, stronger compositions, and more interesting photographs than an ultra-wide lens. When most people think about night photography, they immediately picture massive skies filled with stars. Naturally, that pushes us toward ultra-wide lenses. A 14mm or 16mm lens can capture a huge scene in a single frame, making it easier to fit the Milky Way, mountains, trees, and foreground subjects all into one image. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that approach. In fact, some of our favorite night photographs were taken with ultra-wide lenses. But there's also a downside that often gets overlooked. When you capture everything, sometimes nothing really stands out. Celestial events can appear tiny, mountains look farther away than they felt in person, interesting foreground elements lose their impact, and before long, every image starts looking similar. That's where a 50mm lens starts to change the game. One of the biggest advantages of a 50mm lens is something surprisingly simple. Most of them are fast, really fast. Many affordable 50mm lenses offer apertures of f1.8, while others go all the way down to f1.4. Compared to many zoom lenses, that's a huge difference in light gathering capability. And more light entering the lens means we don't have to push the ISO nearly as hard. Instead of relying on extreme ISO values to brighten the image, the lens is doing more of the work for us. That often translates into cleaner files, better color retention, and improved overall image quality. Even if we don't shoot wide open at f1.4, having that extra flexibility is valuable. We can stop down slightly to improve sharpness and still enjoy excellent low-light performance. That's a luxury many slower lenses simply can't provide. Another benefit is cost. For many camera systems, a 50mm lens remains one of the most affordable lenses available. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on specialty glass to gain access to a fast aperture. In many cases, one of the cheapest lenses in the camera bag can also become one of the most useful for night work. This is where things get really interesting. A 50mm lens forces us to be more selective. Instead of capturing everything in front of us, we have to decide what actually matters. That limitation often leads to stronger photography. We spend more time thinking about framing, subject placement, and storytelling. Rather than relying on a massive field of view, we're building a photograph around a specific subject. In many ways, it feels like cropping with intention before pressing the shutter. Another advantage is perspective. Unlike ultra-wide lenses, a 50mm lens produces a much more natural-looking image. Trees look like trees, buildings look like buildings, people don't appear stretched or distorted near the edges of the frame. The result often feels more realistic and more immersive because it resembles how we naturally experience the scene. One area where a 50mm lens really shines is celestial events. Think about comets, planetary alignments, eclipses, or even a bright moonrise. Ultra-wide lenses can certainly capture these events, but they often make them look incredibly small. Everything becomes a tiny detail in a much larger scene. A 50mm lens strikes a sweet spot. It's wide enough to include important foreground elements such as mountains, observatories, trees, cabins, or rock formations, but it also has enough reach to make the celestial event itself stand out. Instead of the sky being the entire story, the sky and the landscape start working together. That's often where the most memorable images happen. If you've ever used a 50mm lens for portraits during the day, you already know one of its biggest strengths: subject separation. That same advantage carries directly into night photography. Whether we're photographing a person beneath the stars, an abandoned structure, a classic car, or an interesting foreground subject, the wider aperture allows us to separate that subject from the background in a way that ultra-wide lenses simply can't. The longer focal length also introduces a subtle compression effect. Mountains appear larger, distant trees feel closer, foreground and background elements connect more naturally. This can create far more dramatic compositions, especially when compared to ultra-wide images where distant objects often shrink into the background. Another area where the 50mm lens performs surprisingly well is panoramic photography. Because the lens introduces less distortion than an ultra-wide lens, stitched panoramas often come together more cleanly during editing. The final image can look incredibly natural while delivering enormous resolution. The same advantage extends to light painting. Anyone who has tried light painting with an ultra-wide lens knows how easy it is to accidentally illuminate the wrong area, walk into the frame, or even capture unwanted gear in the shot. A tighter field of view gives us much greater control. We can direct light more precisely and create more intentional lighting effects throughout the scene. And then there's portability. Compared to many ultra-wide zooms, a 50mm lens is usually compact and lightweight. When we're hiking a mile or two into a dark location, carrying a tripod, camera body, batteries, and accessories, every ounce matters. The biggest mistake many photographers make is treating the 50mm lens as a daytime lens only. In reality, it can be one of the most versatile night photography tools available. It helps us gather more light, lower ISO values, improve compositions, create stronger subject separation, and photograph celestial events in a more engaging way. It won't replace every ultra-wide lens. There will always be situations where a wider focal length is the right choice. But there are also plenty of situations where the 50mm lens can create a more compelling image. So the next time you're heading out for a night shoot, maybe leave the ultra-wide mounted in the bag for a little while and grab the 50 instead. You might be surprised by how differently you start seeing compositions. You might discover cleaner files, stronger storytelling, and photographs that stand out from the endless stream of ultra-wide night landscapes. The 50 has earned its reputation for a reason, and when it comes to night photography, it deserves far more attention than it usually gets. Thanks for watching, and let us know if a 50mm lens has a permanent spot in your night photography kit. Peace.